Okay, I'll go through the exporting and importing again. So I'm gonna do it a bit different than last time to get even better results with some of the edges here. I will smooth this in another way. So I will go back to this hard poly and won't be actually smoothing it, but I will smooth the corners so that they appear smooth, and then they will appear smooth also in Substance. And that's done from Mesh Display and Soften Edge. All of my polys are selected, and then I'll go Soften Edge. And now the view is similar, but now it's actually smoothened, or it will display those smooth. All of the edges. If you had super tight edges, you can make those tight or hard. That's possible. So if you'd like to, you could select some of the edges, but like for example, I might have these edges on the fins. So I could have some of these hard and some of these softs. Okay, so soften edges. Then I'll export this. So select it, export selection, check that it's on FBX, export selection, and then check that we have the smoothing groups here selected. And then I'm gonna give it a name. So this would be Shark Low Poly Smooth corners, smooth edges. And that's that. Now it's exporting, it takes a few seconds. And then I'll open Substance. The wrong one. Not the wrong one, but the right one. I have two editions on the computer. And no, I don't want to update it. And I'll close it, close the windows. And now I will bring the mesh here. So that would be File, New. It's always creating a new. You cannot open a mesh. You can only create a new project with a mesh. So File, New. Then check whichever is your use. I'm just gonna leave it to Unity. Doesn't matter now if you're not exporting this anywhere. And then I'll select the file. And mine was smooth edges.fbx. So now it will bring that particular file into Substance. Then I'll click on OK, and it's here. And now the edges appear smooth, but they aren't, as you can see. So this guy is better for games now. Okay, next up is the baking. And for the baking, I need the high poly, and you can export it from ZBrush if you haven't yet. So the same kind of baking we did before, but with the actual high poly, the actual with the actual mesh, not the ones that was triangulated before. So, and everything in one mesh, in one subtool, and then export that subtool. And this can be in OBJ or FBX, doesn't matter. And then I'll export this with the name Shark High Poly for Substance. And it takes some seconds to export that one. But if you had it already exported, you of course don't have to export it again. If you need to do changes, you can change the high poly at this point, even though you have done the low poly from this high poly. So you could have more scratches, some more details sculpted in this, and then just export it again. You shouldn't change the overall forms, of course, because the low poly is built from this high poly. So just some minor tweaks. And that's also better if your high poly is done already in the same position than you're gonna do the low poly. So if you make big changes, it's a bit awkward if your high poly and low poly don't match. But then you can make them match again. But that's quite tedious work. So now this is saved. I go back to Substance, and now I can use that high poly to bake the maps. So I'll go to Texture Set Settings, which was a tab next to the layers. If you have lost those, just go to Window, Reset UI to reset everything, and then you'll find them here. So Texture Set Settings. So settings for this texture set, for this shader. And you can see that I only have one shader because I only had one material. But you could divide it in materials, and then you would have more sets here. Okay, then the baking. So mesh maps, bake mesh maps. Some of the mesh maps take quite a long time to bake, so you can try the baking with just the normal first. So bake only the normal first, because then you can check if it's okay. Then you can bake all of these, and you don't have to wait for that long. So only the normal. Then I'll go to the parameters here. The size is already fixed, but 2K is good. Then I go to the high poly parameters here, and I will now add the high poly. So this button here, this list is the high polys. You can have several, but and you can add them here. And mine was the last one was Shark High Poly for Substance OBJ. Great. And now it at least starts to run the baking, and that was it. So, quite good bake. Some minor problems here. For example, this line is poking a bit, and that is probably because there has been changes done to the low poly compared to the high poly. So I would need, probably my best guess would be to tweak the low poly again to have the high poly fitting in better, or actually fitting out. So that's my most major concern. But otherwise it looks quite nice. All the detail from the high poly is baked mostly as a normal map on top of the low poly mesh. And let's have a look at. And these should be hard edges. There's some bleed here on these edges, but overall quite nice looking thing. And then I can start texturing the guy as I see fit. Let's start with a metal surface.